Today we're gonna find out how good is the Voiceless Voice archetype in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! What's potion? You got Matt here and welcome back to the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Video. Phantom Nightmare brought us the next steps in the Snake Eye archetype, bringing that deck up to tier 1, maybe even tier 0 status, but it also introduced us to the brand new Voiceless Voice archetype, which is also going to be incredibly powerful. So in this video, I'll be covering the Voiceless Voice archetype, including an overview on what the cards do and how the deck works, different cards and engines that you'll want to pair with it, and even cards that are going to help you beat it. So if you're excited for the video, then make sure to smash the like button. If this video hits 250 likes, then I'll bring you the ultimate guide on how to beat Voiceless Voice. Also, if you like deck profiles, combo guides, meta discussions, and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos just like this one, you're going to love this channel. So make sure to subscribe and help us reach our new goal of 7,500 subscribers. But with that being said, it's time for us to find out how good is the Voiceless Voice archetype in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's jump into it. So the Voiceless Voice archetype is brand new. Before Phantom Nightmare, we had cards that supported generic ritual strategies, but the archetype itself solves a lot of problems with ritual decks because they make sure that you can maintain card advantage while getting powerful monsters on the field. So the Voiceless Voice cards we're going to be covering today are going to be Lo, the Prayers, Saphira, Dragon Queen, Soravis, Dragon Sage, Skull Guardian Protector, Prayers, the Ritual Spell, Barrier, the Continuous Spell, and Radiance, the Continuous Trap. There are two other Voiceless cards that we'll be releasing in the next couple of months. They are Saphira, Dragon Deity of the Voiceless Voice, and Blessing of the Voiceless Voice. Let's take a deeper look at each of the cards in the Voiceless Voice archetype, starting off with the monsters. As of right now, there are only 4 Voiceless Voice monsters, but honestly, the archetype plays so well with other light, dragon, or warrior ritual monsters in general, so if there's a good one, it's going to likely see a lot of play with Voiceless. The first monster we're going to be covering today is easily the best one, Lo, Prayers of the Voiceless Voice. Lo has 3 effects. On summon, you can place one Voiceless Voice continuous spell or trap card face up in your spell and trap zone. Lo can also be used as the entire tribute for the ritual summon of a light warrior or dragon ritual monster. And its last effect is that if a light warrior or dragon ritual monster is special summoned, you can special summon this card from the graveyard. Saphira, Dragon Queen of the Voiceless Voice, is a level 6 light dragon effect monster. You can discard this card for cost and send one ritual spell from your deck to the graveyard. Then you can add one light ritual warrior or dragon monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Its second effect is that while it's in the graveyard, you can banish it for cost and ritual summon one light ritual warrior or dragon monster by tributing monsters from your hand or field whose level equal or exceed the level of the monster to be summoned. So not only is Saphira amazing at getting you extra consistency by searching out for the ritual monsters, but it's also really good at helping you summon them out by banishing itself from the graveyard too. Our next monster is Soravis, Dragon Sage of the Voiceless Voice. Soravis can special summon itself from the hand by shuffling 2 spells from hand and or graveyard into the deck, including at least one ritual spell card. When your opponent activates a card or effect, you can return this card from the field to the hand as cost and special summon one light ritual warrior or dragon monster from your hand or deck, but shuffle it into the deck in the end phase of the next turn. So basically it allows you to cheat out powerful ritual monsters directly from your deck. Skull Guardian Protector of the Voiceless Voice is a level 7 light warrior ritual monster. While Lo is on your field or in your graveyard, it gains 2050 attack. If this card is ritual summoned, you can add one Voiceless Voice monster or one ritual warrior or dragon monster from your deck to your hand. But the most important effect on this card is going to be that when your opponent activates a card or effect while you control Lo, you can negate the activation and destroy that card. It's because of this effect that pretty much every single Voiceless Voice deck will try to end on Skull Guardian and Lo on their side of the field. Saphira, Queen of Dragons, is not a new card, but it is technically part of the archetype and it blends extremely well with the new cards. During the end phase, if this card is ritual summoned this turn, or if a light monster was sent from hand or deck to the graveyard, you can activate one of these 3 effects. Either draw 2 and discard 1 card from your opponent's hand, or add one light monster from your graveyard to your hand. Soravis, the Ancient and Ascended, is another older card, but it pairs extremely well with the archetype and is easily summonable with the Voiceless Voice cards. It has 2 really solid negation style effects. It can negate the activation of a card or effect that targets a monster you control by discarding it from the hand. And its on-field effect is going to be that when your opponent would special summon a monster, you can return this card to the hand as cost and negate the special summon, and if you do, banish that monster. So essentially, you can use both effects on the same turn. Moving on to the spells and trap cards. For the time being, there are only 3 different spells and traps in the entire archetype, the first of which is Prayers of the Voiceless Voice. This is the ritual spell of the archetype and it has 2 separate effects, the first of which is the classic ritual summoning effect, and the second is that while it's in the graveyard, if a face-up light ritual monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, you can banish it from your graveyard as cost and special summon one Soravis, the Ancient and Ascended, Saphira, Queen of Dragons, or Skull Guardian Protector of the Voiceless Voice from your hand or deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. So Prayers not only allows you to ritual summon out monsters, but it gives you extra protection as well in case your board gets outed. Barrier of the Voiceless Voice is the continuous spell of the strategy. While you control Lo and a light ritual monster, your opponent can only target ritual monsters for attacks. Also, they can't target your light monsters with card effects. So by having Low and a ritual monster, it offers two different forms of protection. Its second effect is a recurring reinforcement of the army style effect, where during your main phase, you can add one Voiceless Voice card or one Skull Guardian ritual monster from your deck to your hand. Radiance of the Voiceless Voice is the continuous trap of the deck. It has two effects, but you can only use one per turn. During the main phase, you can shuffle one light, ritual, warrior, or dragon monster, or one ritual spell from your hand or graveyard into the deck, and if you do, add to hand or special summon one Voiceless Voice monster from your deck. Or you can target cards your opponent controls up to the number of light, ritual, warrior, or dragon monsters you control, and destroy both Radiance and as many of the targeted cards as possible. So Radiance allows you to recycle your resources, or it gives you additional ways to disrupt your opponents. Now that we've covered the cards in the deck, how does the deck actually work? Well, the deck is still in its infancy, with only 7 Voiceless Voice cards being legal, but essentially it utilizes all of the really strong ritual support cards released in the game to get access to Low. Without Low, the deck can't really function. Pretty much every single end board will have both Low and Skull Guardian on the field with at least one of the continuous spell or trap card. Usually it'll be the Barrier because it protects Low from attacks, and it can protect Low and Skull Guardian from targeting effects like Infinite Impermanence. It's also really common to have those cards in the field with Prayers, the ritual spell card, in the graveyard. This allows you to take advantage of Prayer's graveyard effect to rebuild your board should it be broken. And when they have an amazing hand, they also try to get Saravis the Dragon Sage on field to summon another ritual monster from the deck when you activate a card or effect. They also really try to utilize both Prayer's effect to ritual summon and the graveyard effect of Saphira to ritual summon as well. When they have both of these going online, then they have a really strong board that's going to be hard to out. And the deck is also incredibly consistent because of all the other cards in the strategy. These are just some of the cards that you can expect to see in a Voiceless Voice deck. Diviner of the Herald is an amazing way to boost consistency in the strategy. Without Diviner, the deck only has one normal summon, and that's going to be Low. You're going to use Diviner's effect to send from deck to graveyard Trias Hierarchia. You'll then tribute the Diviner to summon the Trias. When Diviner is tributed, you can special summon a level 2 or lower fairy monster from your hand or deck, in this case, Low. So Diviner not only gives the deck access to Low, but it also gets a level 9 monster on the field to be used for ritual summons or for extra deck plays. Pre-Preparation of Rites is an awesome card in this strategy. It might as well be the best card in the deck. It gives it a free +1, which includes adding Prayers, but also any of the ritual monsters I mentioned earlier. So Low and Pre-Prep is an awesome 2-card combination for the strategy. Odd Eye's Pendulum Graph Dragon is a light dragon ritual monster, and it supports Voiceless Voice very well. It's a spell negate when it's on the field in the monster zone, and it adds a ritual spell from deck or graveyard to hand when it's in the pendulum zone. Pot of Prosperity is there for consistency because the deck doesn't utilize the extra deck too much. Nadir Servant and Dogmatica Maximus are also really good for consistency, since you can use the effect of Nadir Servant to send Herald of the Arclight to be able to add any ritual monster or spell, and then you can use Maximus to send other cards to the graveyard and activate effects. Dynamondo is a link monster you've probably never heard of. It's ritual support that gives you access to more ritual monsters, and it acts as removal on summon as well. Super Poly is also an incredibly common main deck card to play in the strategy. The extra deck is rarely used as part of the strategy, so Super Poly and its targets are great. And then we have Branded Fusion. Branded Voiceless Voice is becoming more and more popular. It only needs a small main deck package and 5 or so cards in the extra deck, but it gives the deck even more interruption in the form of Mirajay's non-targeting banish effect. And just so you're ready for it, Summon Limit is one of the most common cards to be played in the side deck for Voiceless Voice. Now for some ratios that we could be expecting. Looking at a common Voiceless Voice deck list, every single deck should be playing, in my opinion, 3 copies of Low, 3 copies of Saphira Dragon Queen, 3 Diviner of the Herald, 3 Pre-Prep, and 3 Barrier, and then any combination of other ritual monsters I mentioned already that equals 2 or 3, including at least 1 Saravis. So whether that's just 3 Saravis or 1 Saravis, 1 Saphira, and 1 Odd Eyes, it's really up to personal preference. Skull Guardian at 2 copies is also the standard. It can be easily searched out from the deck and recycled too, and 2 copies of Prayers, the ritual spell, because it can also be easily recycled. And then Trias Hierarchia for the Diviner package, Saravis, Dragon Sage, and Radiance of the Voiceless Voice are all the 1-ofs in the strategy. Now let's take a look at what cards are going to be good to use against the Voiceless Voice strategy, starting off with cards that are good on your turn 0. Droll and Lockbird isn't always going to be a turn ender against this strategy, but it can make their plays really difficult. By using Droll on pre-prep, they can't add a card with Saphira or with Barrier, or even with Skull Guardian, and they quickly lose resources in their hand which they need to play the game. Ghost Bell or DD Crow are also really solid options. In reality, this spot is reserved for anything that would stop Low from coming back to the field after a ritual monster is summoned. This not only turns off the Skull Guardian negate, but it means it can be targeted as well while Barriers is on the field. And then Ash Blossom is always going to be really good against this strategy. You can use it on Saphira in hand or pre-prep as well, because they both give you essentially a +1 rather than going neutral in card advantage. As for cards that are really good on your turn 1, I would start off with Dimensional Barrier. D-Barrier doesn't only work for extra deck monsters, you can use the effect and call Ritual and stop them from summoning out Ritual monsters that way. I also really like Cosmic Cyclone because it can be used on the barrier, which stops them from getting a search, usually for Saphira. As for cards on turn 2, I love Evenly Matched. Usually they only have one form of negation and it's Skull Guardian. If you can bait that out, then use Evenly, it's very likely they lose their one copy of Radiance, at least one copy of Skull Guardian or Low, and possibly the barrier too. It also doesn't trigger prayers in the graveyard because the card is not leaving the field by an opponent's card effect, it's leaving the field because the opponent's choice. Other cards I like going second are going to be pretty much any of the Kaijus. The main interaction that Voiceless Voice has is usually when they have both Low and a Skull Guardian on the field. So you can always tribute whichever one of those cards is the most problematic. And because it doesn't leave the field by an opponent's card effect, it won't trigger the effect of prayers in graveyard. If they have Radiance on the field, that can be annoying, but usually prayers is going to be the bigger worry. I also wanted to take a minute and talk about Super Polymerization. It's a fine card, it's not the best, but it gets the job done. You can easily turn Low and Skull Guardian into Mudragon, but they can just trigger prayers, summon back a new Skull Guardian, which will trigger Low to summon itself back out. So all it really does is get rid of prayers in the graveyard, and sometimes that's more than enough. It's usually better going first than going second because they can establish their board, you use the effect of Super Poly, and they can't activate their once per turn effects anymore. I also wanted to take the time and talk about Nibiru. I would not personally use Nibiru against this deck here. It's very rare they play into Nib, and because Nib tributes depending on the field, they can gain advantage for it. It also triggers prayers in the graveyard to summon back another ritual monster. To recap, this deck has so much room for non-engine and there are so many ways to play it as well. Either pure, branded, dogmatica. In my research I even saw a purely variant that was very interesting. The deck doesn't have too many cards that are absolute blowouts against it, especially because of how consistent it is. They can usually just play around almost anything. It is definitely one of the top 3 to 5 best decks of the format, and it has a chance against Fire King because of the concise engine it has and all the non-engine they can play, including some that are blowouts against Fire King. And there you have it, you now have an introduction on how to use or beat the Voiceless Voice archetype. Now let me know down in the comments below, what are your thoughts on the video itself and on the archetype too, and are you planning on playing it in this format? Personally, I would love to play it, but lows are like $70 each right now, and I don't even have copies of Divine or the Herald either, so it's going to be a little bit tough for me. But if you made it this far in the video, you must have enjoyed it, so do me a favor and smash the like button. Remember, if this video hits 250 likes, I'll bring you the ultimate guide on how to beat Voiceless Voice in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Make sure to follow me on Twitter and join the Discord server. Both are linked down in the description, and of course, guys, make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. We are so close to our goal of 7,500 subscribers, and we cannot get there without your help. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.